From rivers full of trash to tiny coffin homes and huge empty cities, today we'll explore some of the worst urban places in the world, and each one is worse than the last. Today, Dubai is famous for its tall skyscrapers, luxury lifestyle, and beautiful beaches. People often call it the Las Vegas of the Middle East. But behind all the shine, there's a darker reality. Before all this development, Dubai was much quieter. Take the Nasser Rashid Luta building, for example. Today, it's surrounded by a busy city, but back in the 1970s and early 80s, it stood almost alone in the desert. Nearby, Sheikh Zayed Road has changed a lot too. It used to be just a small two-lane road cutting through empty land. Now, it's a massive highway filled with cars and lined with skyscrapers. Dubai's fast growth started in 1966, when oil was discovered offshore. This brought huge wealth to the city. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, rapid construction turned Dubai into a global tourist and business hub. But this growth came at a cost. Much of the construction was done by migrant workers from Asian countries. Many were promised good pay, but in reality, some earned very little or were not paid at all. In some cases, their passports were taken away, leaving them stuck with no way to return home. These workers often live in crowded labor camps, far away from the luxury parts of the city. Several people may share a single small room. The working conditions can also be dangerous. Temperatures in Dubai can rise above 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. With limited safety measures, many workers face heat stroke and serious accidents. Across the Gulf region, thousands of migrant workers die every year due to these harsh conditions. According to Human Rights Watch, many workers are too afraid to speak out or protest. Some even escape and move to poorer areas in nearby Sharjah, living in slum-like conditions. So while Dubai may look like a perfect city on the surface, much of it was built through extreme hardship. Just a short distance from luxury hotels and influencer photos, there are real stories of struggle that many people never see. And that contrast is what makes it truly unsettling. When it comes to urban jungles, few cities compare to Hong Kong. It has more skyscrapers than anywhere else in the world, but also some of the smallest homes. Back in the 1960s, millions moved in, and the city had no choice but to grow fast. With mountains on one side and the sea on the other, there was only one direction left to build: up. Today, over 7 million people live here. The city is rich, modern, and famous for its food and global trade. But behind that shiny skyline, there's another reality. More than 220,000 people live in tiny subdivided spaces, places like the Monster Building, where thousands of residents are packed into a single housing block. Many apartments are split into coffin homes, barely big enough to lie down in. Some have no windows, no ventilation, and sometimes not even proper walls. People live surrounded by bugs, sharing toilets with dozens of others. And despite these conditions, rent can still go over $300 a month. In one of the richest cities on Earth, nearly 1 in 5 people lives in poverty. Luxury apartments stand just steps away from these cramped spaces, showing a level of inequality that's hard to ignore. Then, in November 2025, tragedy struck. A massive fire at Wang Fu Court spread rapidly through tightly packed buildings, fueled by unsafe construction materials. The flames trapped hundreds. Over 120 people lost their lives. It became one of the deadliest fires in decades, exposing just how dangerous these dense living conditions can be. Beneath the bright lights and towering skyline, Hong Kong hides a harsh truth. For thousands of people, this global city isn't a dream, it's survival. If I said I was moving to a villa community, you'd probably imagine a charming little place somewhere in Europe. But in Dubai, it's a very different story. To expand the city as fast as possible, areas like Nad Al Sheba 3 were built. It has more than 1,500 homes spread across a huge area. But almost every house looks the same. The only real difference between one block and another is a slight change in paint color. This neighborhood, finished in 2019, feels almost unreal, like something designed in The Sims. Everything is neat, organized, and repeated over and over again. The community has everything people need, like shops, schools, and even a mall. So once you're inside, there's not much reason to leave. But that's also the strange part. It feels like a maze of identical houses. At night, finding your own home can actually be confusing, and the whole place has a quiet, empty feeling, like a perfect copy with no personality. Nad al-Sheba 3 may feel strange, but at least people actually live there. That's more than you can say for many of China's so-called ghost cities. In China, there are entire cities filled with empty buildings. Even though the country has over 1.4 billion people, it's estimated there are around 50 cities with huge numbers of unused apartments. Most places struggle with too many people. These cities have the opposite problem. So what went wrong? To grow the economy, the government planned new cities to attract people from rural areas. One major project was Kangbashi district, built near Ordos. In the early 2000s, a coal boom brought in a lot of money. Developers decided to use that wealth to build a modern city for up to 1 million people. Construction started around 2003, and the plan was simple: build everything first, and people would follow. They built skyscrapers, parks, monuments, and cultural centers. On paper, it looked like a perfect future city. But reality didn't cooperate. The city was built too fast. Some buildings had poor construction quality, and property prices were too high. Instead of moving in, many people chose to stay where they were. Today, Kangbashi has only about 150,000 residents. That means most of its buildings, around 80 to 90%, are still empty. And it's not just one city. Across China, there are millions of empty apartments. Some estimates suggest there are enough unused homes to house the entire population of a country like Spain, with millions left over. So instead of crowded streets, you get something eerie: silent roads, empty towers, and neighborhoods that feel paused in time. Cities built for millions, but barely lived in. At this scale, fixing the problem is incredibly difficult. At this point, turning Kangbashi district into a giant paintball arena almost sounds like a practical idea. Living in a diamond city sounds rich and glamorous, but in Mirny it's a very different reality. This small town in Siberia is home to about 40,000 people, sitting not far from the Arctic Circle. And at the center of it all is something that looks less like a workplace, and more like a giant scar in the earth. The Mir mine is one of the largest man-made holes on the planet. It's over 1,700 feet deep and nearly 4,000 feet wide, so massive it almost feels like a doorway into the ground itself. Since the 1950s, this mine has produced over 200 million carats of diamonds. Even today, mining still drives the town's entire existence, with most residents working for Alrosa. But the mine comes with serious risks. In 2017, disaster struck when water broke into the tunnels, flooding parts of the mine. Dozens of workers were trapped underground. Rescue teams worked for days, but not everyone made it out alive. Even so, the mine reopened years later, and more diamonds were found. The danger never really went away. It just became part of daily life. And then there's the climate. Winters in this part of Siberia can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. So life here is a constant battle between two extremes: freezing cold above ground and dangerous conditions below it. For many people in Mirny, there aren't many other options. The mine isn't just a job, it's the reason the city exists. So while it may be built on diamonds, this place feels far from luxury, more like a city balanced on the edge of survival. Let's jump from Russia to Hangzhou, a city known for modern buildings, ancient temples, and something much stranger. On the outskirts, there's a massive car graveyard filled with thousands of abandoned vehicles. It looks like a scene from a zombie movie. This eerie site was discovered in 2021. The cars weren't junked by owners. They were left behind by their own manufacturer. Back in 2018, a company called Leeco tried to enter the future of transport. Through its ride-sharing service Panda Auto, they planned to launch self-driving electric taxis, similar to apps like Uber. At first, things looked promising. Panda Auto was already operating in multiple cities with millions of users. But there was one big problem: the new autonomous cars weren't ready. When they were tested in cities like Chongqing, many of them failed badly. The technology just didn't work as expected. Meanwhile, Leeco had already spent huge amounts of money on the project. By 2020, the company collapsed under billions of dollars in debt after selling only a small number of cars. With no money left, Panda Auto also shut down. And just like that, thousands of brand new cars had no purpose. So what happened next? Instead of fixing or removing them, the vehicles were simply dumped in an open field outside Hangzhou. Now they sit there, slowly decaying. Nature is starting to take over. Grass grows around them, paint fades, metal rusts. What was supposed to be the future of transportation has turned into a silent, rusting reminder of failure. A mechanical graveyard, where ambition was left to rot. If you've ever lived near a busy road, you know how hard it is to sleep with all the noise. Engines, horns, constant traffic. It never really stops, but that's nothing compared to this apartment building in Naples. Here, homes sit directly under the Tangenziale di Napoli, a major highway that connects Pozzuoli to the city's airport. It carries around 270,000 vehicles every single day. Now imagine that. Cars aren't just passing by, they're driving right above your roof. These apartments are squeezed between the ground and the highway, so residents hear every engine, every horn, every screech of tires. Day and night, non-stop. What makes it worse is that many of these homes existed long before the highway. Some buildings in Naples are decades or even centuries old. But when the road was built in 1972, it was placed right over them. No escape, just concrete above your head. And if that sounds bad, it gets even more intense. In Guiyang, there's the Shuiku Bridge, built in 1997. A couple of years later, apartments were constructed directly underneath it. This time, it wasn't an accident. The buildings were designed that way. People living there say their rooms constantly shake from the traffic above. Some even use cotton in their ears just to sleep at night. So instead of quiet nights, it's like living inside a machine that never turns off. At that point, sleep isn't rest. It's survival. But China is famous for some truly mind-bending roads, like this sky-high highway in Chongqing. Part of the massive Huangjuiwen interchange, this multi-level maze rises about 120 feet into the air. It has 5 stacked layers and roads branching out in 8 different directions. It took 8 years to build and finally opened in 2017, designed to improve traffic flow and connect the city more efficiently. On paper, it sounds perfect. In reality, it's chaos. The sheer number of lanes, ramps, and exits confuses almost everyone. Even GPS systems struggle to keep up. One wrong move, and instead of exiting where you planned, you could end up heading in a completely different direction. Driving here isn't just about getting from point A to B. It's like solving a puzzle at 100 kilometers per hour with no pause button. Let's warm things up with a trip to the beach in Canada. Now, Canada is better known for snow and mountains than sandy coastlines. And when you look at Burlington Beach, it's easy to see why. In summer, people head to Lake Ontario to cool off. But instead of palm trees and clear skies, the beach is surrounded by power lines, huge transmission towers, and an industrial bridge. It feels less like a vacation spot and more like an industrial zone. And there's an even darker problem. This beach is a natural breeding ground for many bird species, but the overhead power lines are dangerous. Birds often collide with them and fall into the water below. So instead of a peaceful swim, you've got a setting filled with concrete and the aftermath of those collisions. Some people have suggested moving the power lines underground to make the area safer and more pleasant. But the cost would be massive, around $150 million, and so far, nothing has changed. So if you're heading to Canada, maybe enjoy the food, the winter sports, and the scenery. And give this beach a quiet pass. In Istanbul, the government did approve a coastal development, but it came with a heavy cost. In 2018, 4 high-rise buildings with over 600 apartments were built along the Sea of Marmara. Sounds great, right? Not if you lived behind them. These towers were placed directly in front of older, smaller homes, completely blocking their ocean view. Overnight, peaceful seaside houses turned into properties staring at a wall of concrete. And it didn't stop there. The project expanded into a full luxury complex called Sea Pearl Istanbul, with a 5-star hotel, restaurants, and a shopping mall. So now, instead of open sea, residents are surrounded by construction, crowds, and noise. Property values dropped, the view disappeared, and the people who lived there were left dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, the developers behind it, Qatari dinar, stand to make millions. For locals, it's a simple equation. Their loss, someone else's profit. And unfortunately, this isn't the only place where paradise has been traded for development. Over in Cat Ba Island in Vietnam, a similar story is unfolding. This island is famous for its rainforests, wildlife, and beautiful bays. It's even recognized by UNESCO as a biosphere reserve. But since 2017, developers have been transforming it into a massive resort project. They've started filling in parts of the ocean to create space for hotels, an amusement park, and multiple golf courses, turning a natural bay into a 110-acre construction zone. The problem? Nature is paying the price. One of the island's rarest scan, the Cat Ba Langur, is critically endangered, with only around 70 left. The constant noise, pollution, and boat traffic are pushing them deeper into hiding. What used to be a peaceful, untouched environment is now filled with machinery and tourists. And here's the irony. People visited Cat Ba Island for its natural beauty. By destroying that, the island might actually become less attractive to visitors. It's like erasing the very reason the place existed in the first place. Concrete replaces coastline, noise replaces nature, and once it's gone, it's not coming back. There's nothing worse than being stuck in traffic. Even 10 minutes can ruin your mood. But imagine this. In August 2010, drivers on China National Highway 110 faced one of the worst traffic jams in history. The line of vehicles stretched for about 100 kilometers between Inner Mongolia and Hebei. And it didn't clear for 12 days. Cars barely moved. Some drivers only managed half a mile per day. People had to eat, sleep, and live inside their vehicles. It turned into a strange roadside economy. Local sellers walked along the highway, selling water, noodles, and cigarettes at heavily inflated prices. A simple bottle of water could cost many times its normal price. At night, things got worse. Some drivers were robbed, and fuel was even siphoned out of cars while people slept. So what caused this nightmare? Traffic in China had been growing rapidly for years. By 2010, this highway was already carrying far more vehicles than it was designed for. Then construction work forced even more cars onto the same road, while coal trucks crowded in from nearby regions. Everything combined, and the system broke. A traffic jam so big, it basically became a temporary city. And it's not just China. Over in the United States, Interstate 405 in Los Angeles is one of the busiest highways in the world. It connects major areas like Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and carries hundreds of thousands of cars every day. But here's the problem. People are still building homes right next to it. All those cars produce huge amounts of exhaust fumes, and studies have shown that living close to busy highways increases the risk of serious health issues like heart disease and lung problems. Yet construction continues. Why? Because wealthier areas often push development away from their neighborhoods, which means more buildings go up near polluted roads instead. So more homes equals more cars equals even worse traffic. It's a loop that keeps feeding itself. Traffic in Los Angeles has become so famous, it's almost a global joke. But the reality isn't funny. More lanes are being added, more cars are filling the roads, and more pollution is being pumped into the air. At some point you have to wonder, maybe the problem isn't the roads. Maybe it's how much we rely on them. Getting stuck on a highway might be boring, but at least everything moves slowly, so crashes are less likely. Now compare that to this chaos in Hanoi. In 2019, heavy flooding covered many roads across the city. With entire streets underwater, hundreds of drivers were forced toward the same intersection. And that's when things fell apart. Cars and motorbikes all pushed forward at once, trying to squeeze through from every direction. No order, no lanes, just a complete free-for-all. It turned into a gridlocked knot of vehicles, each one blocking the other. Part of the problem is how traffic works in Hanoi. Motorbikes are everywhere, and in some cases, traffic rules like red lights aren't always followed strictly. When vehicles from opposite directions keep moving at the same time, intersections can quickly become trapped. Flooding just made it worse. It forced everyone into the same space at the same time. By 2025, authorities increased fines for running red lights, hoping to bring more order to the roads. But back in 2019, there was no fixing it in the moment. Just a sea of engines, horns, and frustration. And on that day, nobody was getting anywhere. Lots of places compete to be called the most beautiful city in the world. But Charleroi has earned a very different reputation. It's often labelled one of the ugliest cities in Europe. And strangely, that's part of its economy. While the city centre is decent, large areas are dominated by abandoned factories, rusting steel structures, and empty industrial zones. These are leftovers from its past, when Charleroi was a major hub during the Industrial Revolution. Back in the 1800s, coal and steel made the city thrive. But by the 1950s, coal started losing value as oil became more popular. Mines closed, factories shut down, and many were simply left behind. Steel production held on for a while, until the early 2000s, when the global financial crisis dealt the final blow. Major sites like the Cockerill Sambra steelworks eventually shut down, leaving huge empty structures behind. The impact on the city has been massive. Unemployment is much higher than the national average, and many areas feel frozen in time. But here's the unexpected twist. Some residents have turned this decay into a business. Tour guides now take visitors through abandoned factories, graffiti-covered metro stations, and broken industrial landscapes. People come to see the ugly side of the city, almost like a real-life dystopian set. Places like the Rue de la Providence are even known for their bleak industrial views. There are tours, photo shoots, even events held inside these old factory skeletons. It's tourism, but not the kind you'd expect. Instead of beaches or landmarks, it's rust, concrete, and silence. A city that once powered an industrial boom, now surviving by showing the world what happens after it ends. They say when buying a house, the most important thing is location, location, location. So moving to a global city like Taipei or New York City sounds like an easy choice. But for some people, it doesn't turn out that way. In Taipei, many apartments have balconies covered with metal bars for safety, but they often look more like cages than homes. With extremely high population density, space is limited, and these small apartments can feel even more closed in. Some areas are so crowded that tens of thousands of people live within a single square mile. And then there's New York City. Living in places like Manhattan sounds glamorous, but the reality can be very different. Back in 1879, the city introduced a law requiring every room to have a window facing open air. It was meant to improve living conditions. But as buildings packed closer together, that open air often became another building just a few feet away. So instead of a skyline view, many residents look straight into someone else's apartment. In cities like these, you might get the perfect location, but not always the view you imagined. Still, it could be worse. A brick wall isn't great, but at least it's not this. In Łódź, Hotel Elizia looks pretty nice online, but when guests arrive, they realize it's just a few steps away from the massive EC2 power plant. Not exactly the relaxing view you'd expect. Because of this, the hotel has faced criticism for being misleading in its photos, and even though the power plant shut down in 2015, its huge cooling tower still dominates the view. So instead of a scenic getaway, you get an industrial backdrop. That said, it's not all bad. The hotel has received some decent reviews and has gone through renovations to improve the experience. And at least now, with the plant closed, guests don't have to deal with smoke or pollution. Still, it's probably not the kind of room with a view most people are hoping for. One of the worst parts of modern life is constant advertising. Step outside and you're hit with ads for food, clothes, perfumes, everything. But in Hyderabad, it goes to another level. Entire streets are covered in ads, stacked on top of each other in a chaotic mix of colors and signs. It's so crowded that nothing even stands out anymore. It makes Times Square look almost organized. Still, visual pollution is one thing. Actual pollution is much worse. In Dhaka, some canals under bridges have turned into slow-moving rivers of trash. Surrounded by waste on all sides, it's not just unpleasant, it's a serious everyday reality for many people. So after seeing all these places, which one shocked you the most?